Shanty Town is a show that is not afraid of the filth and vulgarity that comes with the subject matter. With gorgeous cinematography, breathtaking performances, and a star-studded cast, Shanty Town is a story that explores the depths of human emotion. Greed, lust, power, shame, desire, anger, and guilt. The things that make us human and the choices that define the way of a man. Hi, I'm Miss Rax, and welcome to my channel. You're watching a series on my channel called Nollywood on Netflix, where I exclusively discuss Nollywood movies and TV shows on Netflix. And today we're going to be talking about Shanty Town. Since King of Boys, we've been given shows that explore the underbelly of Nigerian society. It's crude, it's jarring, it's gritty, and it's brutally honest. I see them as a direct rebellion to the shows of the early 2000s and 2010s that depicted this utopian Nigeria that was obsessed with opulence and grandeur and the kind of wealth and experiences that were only accessible to the upper class and richer people in our community. I will be fair, however, because those shows that were obsessed with that kind of wealth and grandeur were more of a reaction to the kinds of narratives that were pushed about Africa. So in Western media we have shows, films that would showcase Africa as this barren wasteland or this jungle with poverty-stricken people and people who are not intelligent and needed some sort of support from Western communities or Western countries. African films of the time sought to challenge these ideas by portraying a Nigeria that was capable of wealth. It showcased Nigerians living lavish, living big, wealthy lives. And although it was effective, it created this disconnect between the people who were watching it, which is Nigerians and other Africans, and the people who it was made for. And because there was this dissonance when they looked at the screen, there wasn't a lot of audience relatability to what was being portrayed in the media concerning them. It was supposed to be films about Nigerians, yet Nigerians were not seeing themselves on screen. We're currently experiencing this reawakening where films and shows are becoming more grounded and self-aware. The media is now exploring themes that would affect the average Nigerian: poverty, insecurity, greed, corruption, all these things that affect the average Nigerian on a regular day. I'm happy to see this as a sign that we're moving towards a more well-rounded representation in our own media. The easiest way to explain it is that Shanty Town explores what the inner workings of crime in Lagos State looks like. Of course, this is completely fictional, and I cannot say personally it's based off of any real events or people. However, allegedly, but it does explore how kingpins and crime and all these things are organized in one way or the other. And it's an interesting story. Shanty Town explored themes of debauchery, power, desire, wealth, and corruption. The show guides us through the underbelly of Lagos State, giving us a peek behind the curtains. And this show is incredibly intense, and it could be very triggering for many audiences if you go in completely blind. It contains graphic scenes of violence, sexual violence, abuse, drug use, and nudity. And I recommend that you go in watching it if you do want to watch it with your eyes completely open. There are some things that I loved about it, and one of them is the diverse multilingual characters and cast. I noticed a small detail that all the actors that they hired were characterized in their own ethnic groups, and they got to speak their native language in one way or the other. It was especially refreshing to see Inyado speaking Ibibio, which happens to be my own native dialect of my mother tongue, and it was very nice to see that on screen, as well as the Yoruba pidgin. The use of language in this show is very rich and really adds to explaining the context and setting of the show. And one thing that I think was also really cool is because Lagos as a state is already this melting pot of cultures, having a space where all these different cultures can be represented was really cool, because for some reason a lot of shows and films in Nigerian media tend to be very monotone and homogeneous. So they only represent a certain ethnic group at a time. So it was very refreshing. And I think Iniedo is actually doing that intentionally, because I've noticed a pattern in most of the things she's been appearing in recent years, where she has characters that are from our culture and have the name, and sometimes she uses the language, and I really appreciate that as an indigent. So that was really nice. And another thing is the amazing performance by the cast. Oh my god, everybody really puts in their best, and I really appreciate that. Like, the monologues were so rich and captivating. Usually monologues have a tendency to be very exhausting because it's just one person talking for a period of time. But when you have characters that are eccentric and have a way of holding your attention, it's very cool to watch. For instance, the Dame. I loved her particular monologue. The only person's monologue that I was a little bit tired of was, I think, RMD, which is very weird because I love RMD. I love RMD. So, um, but he did give a very good performance. Like, he knows how to play powerful man very well. Scar's character was one of the best performances on the show because of how he gave everything. Like, you could easily tell me that this man was an Aguero in real life, and I'll believe you. Because the way he was able to switch between all the different languages, how he was able to show that grittiness, that crudeness that comes with being born and bred on the streets was something to behold, and I really enjoyed myself watching that. Costume and makeup was another part of this show that was just delicious, and I really enjoyed every part of it. Like, the characters with influence and wealth were consistently serving look after look after look after look, and I have to give people their props when it's due. They tried, they really did. They did wonderful. And I think that's just becoming a pattern in the new things, like new series on Netflix that are coming out. Like, people who are doing like hair, makeup, costume, somebody somewhere is owing them a lot of money because they are carrying most of that show. And then the cinematography, another thing that I've really noticed has improved over time in Nigerian cinema on more like international platforms. The cinematography is always so good. The choreography and visual effects for most of the fight scenes were also very well done. I like to see that the Nigerian media is starting to prioritize authentic portrayals, and they're investing in their choreography of their fight scenes, because it kind of adds to how sophisticated a particular show or film is. If the people are fighting don't look like they're fighting properly, or if the visual effects are off, it kind of makes your show look cheap, to say the least. So to see really good visual effects, they are not perfect yet, but they are definitely a step up from where they've been. Was really good. I like to see that. I can see that the producers really invested in making their fight scenes, because there are quite a number of them. So making their fight scenes good, that was really nice. They did a really good job. And then the lighting, the cinematography. You guys in that department are just eating us up here. Every time I see something new from Nigeria on Netflix, the cinematography people are just day in day out. You'll eat that, because the lighting was, in fact, the lighting was at least 60% of what made this show visually appealing, because I saw them experimenting with colors, experimenting with how those lights are motivated, and then using them to set the scene and to detect the tone of the series, and that was really really fun to watch. So again, props to you guys, that was amazing. And all the different actors, I don't think I mentioned everybody, but everybody that was a major character really did put up their best show, and they made the show worth watching. When I say it's violent, it's pretty violent, it's pretty graphic. It's there's a I know that a lot of people will be hung up on the nudity, but that's such a small part of the show. It is very graphic in its portrayal of sex, but it's also a series about prostitutes, and to downplay the sex part. I'm not saying it is necessary, but downplaying it kind of cheapens what the show is about. It's trying to be gritty, it's trying to be honest, and it's being honest about the nature of what this show is. I think story wise, it was also a pretty good story. Like, I don't have an issue with the structure or the story that was being told. It was very good and very decent. I think the only issue that I have would be the ending. I don't like how it was wrapped up because a lot of the show was setting up plot points and building up momentum towards the end of the series, and the way everything ended felt very flat. I also want to mention, when I'm doing reviews for Nollywood on Netflix, the metrics that I use to analyze these films and the lens that I'm looking at it from is going to be very different than when I'm doing other shows or other series from other countries and other industries. The reason is I understand where Nollywood is coming from, and I know what it takes for them to get to where they are right now. I understand the realities. And in terms of everything else, Nigeria and Nollywood has been cheated in the international film community, and they've kind of had to catch up even though they started late, and I respect that. So when I'm looking at TV shows and films, I'm not going to be as strict and I'm not going to be as rigid. I would give them a lot of room for errors, and I would be kind. Let me say that. I would be more kind than I would to any other film from anything. Like a lot of the things on Netflix, I could criticize them and I wanted to blink an eye, and you would probably be wondering like, but you allowed this thing to slide on this Nigerian stuff, and yeah, I would, because I know what it has taken for them to get to where they are. But Hollywood doesn't have an excuse to be mediocre. Um, Netflix, all these streaming platforms, they have enough resources and they have enough experience and they've had enough time to develop themselves, and they have access to making these great films. So they have no excuse for subpar media. I could give Nigeria a little bit of room for that. But however, there are just some things that I will not slide. There are some films that I wouldn't. Fate of Alakada. The day I have time for that film. Oh my god. There are just some films, there are just some people, there are just some producers that I will not, because the fact that Nollywood has gotten to where it is, there are just some people that when they produce some things, I feel like they're setting us back, because what are you doing? What is this? Girl. Anyways, so again, it's a great show. It's a good show. It's a decent show. um if you're somebody that is very sensitive to graphic content, I would not recommend it, because it is very vivid with everything it portrays. If it's going to talk about sex, it's going to talk about sex. If it's going to talk about violence, it's going to talk about violence. It's talking about anything. It's like all the way through. Like there's no sugarcoating, there's no none of that. So if you're very sensitive or you're easily triggered by things like this, graphic content is just not for you. Please steer clear of this show. Don't give in to the hype. From like you're not missing anything. Don't worry. There's something else on Netflix for you. Okay? So I think that's all for today. I love you guys and I hope you have a great day. Bye.